Welcome to QCC's Face the Region. Face the Region is produced by Quinsigamond Community College to assist our region in attaining educational, economic, and personal prosperity. Welcome once again to QCC's Face the Region here on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN. I'm Zip Zipfel, and joining me this afternoon from the Financial Aid Department at Quinsigamond Community College is Robert Lecanto, the Associate Director.
Associate Director, yep, that's correct.
All right. Tell us a bit, just a quick overview of your job and the Financial Aid Department here at QCC.
Well, the overview of the Financial Aid Office is basically to process financial aid applications for all QCC students that are interested in applying for aid. So we're having students fill out what we call the free federal application, the free application for federal student aid. FAFSA is the acronym for that. And basically we're reviewing all that information, determining students' eligibility for aid. So we're determining eligibility for funds through the institution, state funding, federal funds. And as you know, financial aid is really important to a lot of students. And basically we are reviewing all those applications, determining eligibility, and sending out award letters and enabling students to come to QCC.
When you talk about financial aid, how many different sources are there for the?
That's a good question. It can depend on the institution. So at a school like QCC, the majority of the funding is coming from the state of Massachusetts or the federal government in the forms of loans and grants. But QCC also has a number of scholarships that they award out to students based on financial need also. So the majority of the funding is from the state or the federal government.
Are they difficult to apply for from a student perspective? I guess if you're not used to going through that kind of thing, it can be a little daunting.
It can. The process, no doubt about it, the process can be very daunting. So we've spent a lot of time working with students. A lot of times students just come into the office, they don't understand where to begin the process. So we spend a lot of time working with them to making sure they fill out the application. So the first step really is doing that FAFSA application. The free application for federal student aid. That's kind of the entry point, I like to call it. That's the first thing to do. Complete that application, and that they report their financial information, income, assets, family size, things like that on there. And then we get that information comes in electronically. We review that information, and there may be other forms that we need from the students, so we communicate to them if we need clarification of information. Sometimes students are selected by the Department of Education for something called verification. And that requires us to request some additional information. So it might be forms we need to send them, they fill that out and bring that back to us. So the process can be kind of daunting. I think anytime you're dealing with financial matters, it's a little scary. And sometimes students basically don't know if they can afford to come, they need that award letter. So we try to guide them through that process and help them any way we can.
Now this may seem like a very simplistic question, but when you speak of financial aid, is financial aid a loan? Is it always?
It's a good question.
Do you always have to pay it back?
Right. So that's a really good question. So financial aid comes in many different forms. It comes in grants, and grants usually refer to something that's based on financial need. So the financial information you're putting on the FAFSA, like your income and your assets. Scholarships usually refers to something that's based on academics. Based on a certain academic standing, grades, activities, things like that. There might be scholarships that are given out. Usually it refers to academics. And then there's loans, which have to be paid back. There are federal loan programs, there are some state loan programs that traditionally don't get paid back till after the student leaves school. So usually about 6 to 9 months after the student leaves school, they start making payments on those loans. And then the last component is work. There is work study, which allows students to obtain a job on campus and work and earn a wage. Just like any other job they would have. They would work a set amount of hours and be paid bi-weekly paycheck and things like that. So there's different types of forms of aid. Obviously students want to get as much as they can in grants and scholarships, so we like to call that free money, because obviously that doesn't have to get paid back. That's the good stuff, And then loans are important too. A lot of times students here especially use loans for assisting with off-campus expenses.
Sure.
For rent and food and other personal expenses they might have. So loans come into play there.
From your perspective, is it a good idea to always investigate financial aid, regardless of what your financial situation might be?
You should always do that, because I think too often people assume they may not be eligible for financial aid. And that very well may not be the case. I know I've had instances in other institutions that I've worked at, either students or parents basically stating, well, I know I make too much money, or I know I make this or that, and they don't really know. I mean, unfortunately, I like to joke there's no shortage of neighbors or brother-in-laws that give you really bad information on financial aid. I mean, they mean well, but they basically talk about their experiences, which can be very different than yours. So sometimes people just kind of assume they opt out of the process. They assume, well, I'm not eligible, or all there is loans, as you mentioned. Is it just loans? They think it's loans, and they don't really want loans and things like that. But I always tell families or students, it's always best to apply. Let the office, the financial aid office, basically determine what you are or not eligible for. And then you can decide. If you get an award letter and it has loans, you don't want the loans, there's no obligation to take the loans. The college has an obligation to inform you what you're eligible for, but then you can decide what you want to keep or not keep or utilize for your education.
Are some students reticent about almost like applying for unemployment? It's like, well, it's a little embarrassing that I actually need, or is that not the case any longer?
I think it depends on the institution, but I think you're at the point where there's so many students applying for financial aid. Now, at a school like QCC, where tuition and fees are rather reasonable,
sure.
We still have over 65% of our students applying for some type of financial aid.
Wow.
You start getting into other colleges, universities, private schools, where the tuition and fees can be over $50,000. It's probably more. It's probably rarer to find the person who's not applying for aid than the people who are on financial aid. So I think some of the stigma that maybe years ago people had, only poor people apply for aid, or I don't want to be seen as I need help, or things like that. I think a lot of that has kind of gone, as unfortunately at some schools the price tag has continued to climb. But one of the nice things here is tuition and fees are very reasonable, and a lot of times students can pay for tuition and fees without having to incur loan debt.
Right, sure.
Which is nice.
Sure, and I guess this is a tough question too. Kids or adults, non-traditional students who are, say, 40, 50 years old,
Sure.
think, I've always wanted to go back and finish or get a degree. There's no real thumbnail of a cost per credit. Does it always vary depending on how far you want to go, or is there a flat?
Well, there's like a per credit cost depending if you're an in-school. Like right now, for in-state students, with the majority of students here at QCC would be in-state students, there is a set fee of $24 per credit hour. So the tuition part is rather reasonable.
Yeah.
Take 10 credits, that's $240. There are other fees and things like that do increase the cost of what the student's being billed for. But it's not really it's not really tied to like if you take this course or that course,
it's more expensive or more involved.
Right.
But there may be expenses attached to that.
Sure.
In other words, more in books.
Exactly. Certain majors may have some additional expenses. Maybe some of the students that are going through nursing programs may have some additional expenses that other students may not have, and things like that. As you said, books for some classes may be expensive than for another class. But as far as the per tuition hour credit, I should say, what they're being billed, that's pretty much a standard cost.
And I know this is kind of an arbitrary question too, but for those people looking for, I hate to say this, a return on investment for going back to school, you're never guaranteed a bump in salary or a job position. But I mean,
Correct.
In general, do you consider it to be a solid investment?
If you look at studies, even students with to go on to a bachelor's degree potentially are going to make over the lifetime $1 million more in salary than somebody just graduated from high school.
Sure.
And a lot of times it's just it's kind of in some ways a degree, whether associate's degree, bachelor's degree, advanced degree, it's almost the ticket for admission, in the sense that if you don't have that degree, you can't even apply for that position.
Right.
They want that piece of paper. They want you to have that associate's degree, that bachelor's degree. And even though you might have the life experience, that may still not be enough without having the degree that the employer wants.
Great.
So it definitely, statistics show whether associate's degree, bachelor's degree, those people from a financial standpoint are much more successful.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the next segment
Sure.
about life experience and how that plays as far as how schools look at that.
Yep.
We're chatting this afternoon with Robert LeConto, the Associate Director of Financial Aid here at Quinsigamond Community College, as we continue with QCC's Face the Region here on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN. We're back in just a minute. Welcome back to QCC's Face the Region here on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN. Zip Zipfel, along with Robert LeConto, the Associate Director of Financial Aid in the Financial Aid Department here at QCC, and discussing the really many ways you can get help to finance your entry into a college scenario, or a re-entry if you happen to be in the workforce and thinking about going back. During the break, we were talking about deadlines. Quite often, deadlines can pose a problem if you're not timely.
Yeah, deadlines play a really important role. I mean, too often we have students here that apply and they miss our priority deadlines. And what happens is you've got a scenario where a student is eligible for grant assistance, and they're not getting it because they've missed the deadline and those funds are just exhausted at that point. So we try to stress with students when they know they're coming here is to get that financial aid form filled out as quickly as possible. For the financial aid year that's going to start in the fall of this year, the financial aid application opened up October 1st of last year. So we're already about 6 months into the process right now of applying. And our priority deadlines is April 1st. And the state of Massachusetts has a priority filing deadline for their state grant program at May 1st. So if you've got students out there that are thinking of applying, we're already, we're in the March timeframe now. This is the time to really start making sure you get your application in. Because it's unfortunate when you get somebody who's eligible for something and they only don't receive that grant because of missing the deadline.
Sure. Is there one specific location, at least on the QCC website, you can go to see about financial aid,
Yep.
or do you have to kind of Google?
No, well, you can't. I mean, you can do that, but obviously, if you come to the QCC website, you can just actually type in financial aid.
Yeah.
We've got an entire financial aid page, which shows all about grants, scholarship, loans, deadlines, any forms that we might request from you. Students can print out and fill out and send in to us. So it's kind of pretty much everything the student needs is right there on our financial aid page on the website, which is nice.
So walk me through a typical scenario. I'm Joe's
Sure.
student.
Yep.
I've decided I've logged on. I have made the initial inquiry.
Sure.
And the first thing is filling out that very first form.
Yeah, I mean, from the financial aid process, it's filling out the free federal application, the federal aid for student aid. The FAFSA application is kind of the first thing you need to do. Because as I think I said in the first part of our conversation, pretty much the student's putting in their financial information right there. That information comes into us electronically, and then based on that information that comes in kind of determines our next steps. That might be all the student needs to do. If they are selected for verification, which is a random selection by the Department of Education, we may have to verify certain information. We have to verify income or family size or things like that.
IRS.
I guess that's kind of a way to put it. It's almost like a little mini, I guess if you want to say kind of like a mini audit maybe.
Right.
It's a random selection just for us to verify certain information. And then there's usually a form that has to come out, or maybe the student needs to do something to verify income. But we kind of walk them through that process. They don't understand that. We can tell them exactly where to go and how to do that. But also the student has to be accepted into eligible program at the college. That's really important too, that they're accepted by the college before they're going to get financial aid. We're not going to send a financial aid award letter out to somebody who's not accepted by the institution.
Right. Now, is there ever a scenario where you get accepted by the school
Yep.
and you actually start school without having your financial aid solid?
Yeah, that happens.
Is that kind of a dice roll?
That does happen. I mean, I think the college is pretty willing to work with students that might be in that situation, because we have a lot of students that decide to come back very late in the process. Maybe they're not even thinking of coming during the normal application periods, which would be right now, and all of a sudden over the summer they decide to do that. So they're trying to play a little catch up. We spend a lot of time trying to get those students so that they can get everything completed and then successfully get into their classes without missing those classes. But it is common that sometimes students will start the semester with financial aid not in place. And try to get that done. But realistically, the process doesn't take long. I mean, you fill out the FAFSA application, those results come into us within a couple of days.
Wow.
And if we need information, we forward that out. So we try to get letters out and information out to students rather quickly. We're always here. I mean, we're here 8 to 7 Monday through Thursday, and 8 to 5 on Fridays. So lots of availability for people to contact us, whether it's in person, if they don't understand something. I always try to encourage students when we do like open house events or other things on campus is, it is complex. As you said before, it's kind of daunting. So it's really trying to get them to not feel embarrassed to come in and ask questions. If you don't know the answer to something, you don't know the answer to something. It's better to come in, ask. If you receive a form from us, you're not sure how to fill that out, talk to us about that, as opposed to filling it out, maybe filling it out wrong. Now it has to go back and things like that. It's just important that students basically, as I said before, kind of meet deadlines. Keep your eye on your snail mail or your Q mail as we send communications to you. Get forms back to us in a timely manner, because the quicker you get things in, the quicker you're going to get information from us. And then you don't have to deal with a lot of the last minute stuff that happens in that, August, September timeframe.
So what would be a good solid cushion of time if you knew you wanted to start, say, on September 1st,
Yep.
if that was the start date?
Yep.
When would you want to be thinking about getting this entire thing rolling?
Well, if you haven't done it already, this would be the time to start doing it. As I said before, the free federal application, the FAFSA application for the fall opened up as of October 1st. But if you haven't done it, this would be the time to start doing it, because we got our priority deadline coming up of April 1st, and then the state deadline of May 1st. So this would really be the time to really start doing it. And as I said, it doesn't take, you file an application, we get information, once you start pulling information in, it's usually 24 to 48 hours. It's pretty quick as far as information coming in. A little bit longer for us to review that, depending on if we need information from the student. That could be a little bit longer to get award letters out, depending on the level of information we need from students. But basically, the sooner you start, the quicker you're going to hear from us, and the quicker you're going to get your award. And then, unfortunately, we do have lines in the late August, September timeframe, unfortunately. But if you do things early, hopefully you're not somebody who has to be in one of those lines trying to figure things out. And you don't want that pressure when you're starting school, and you already may have some, maybe you're going back to school or starting for the first time. You got some of that anxiety that comes with that. The last thing you need is the financial pressures too. Get that done over the summer and start fresh, with your classes ready to go in September.
Now, when it comes to approving financial
Yep.
aid, is it just a number crunching thing, or are there other factors?
That's a really good question, because on the form, I think a lot of times I've had people say to me, well, if I tell you I make X amount of dollars, can you tell me if I'm eligible? And it's not always that simple. It is based on finances. I guess if you told me you make, $5 million, I can pretty much feel comfortable telling you you're not going to be eligible for most types of financial aid. But for most families, it's looking at income and assets, but also takes into consideration family size. Because you could take two families that have the exact same income, but maybe one family has 2 students in school and another family only has 1. So obviously the expectations of that family with 2 children in school is going to be less than with 1, because they're funding 2 educations.
Sure.
Or maybe a family that has the same income, but there's 3 family members in family A, and the other family there's 8 family members. Obviously the expectation would be less for that larger family, because it's taking into consideration there are other people in the household. And obviously there's other expenses that have to be paid out of that for each person.
But once you're
yeah.
accepted by the school, your academic status does not affect
No.
the approval.
No,
Right.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So there's not anything based on that. You do have to be accepted, because obviously we don't want to send a financial aid award out to somebody who's not, accepted by the institution. That would be a little cruel, maybe. Here's your aid package. Oh, by the way, you can't come. So every school, no matter whether it's QCC or any school, you do have to be accepted. And then the financial aid goes out at that point. So that's kind of the first thing you need to do. But we try to get students to do things in a certain order, but unfortunately sometimes they like to do things in their own order.
Sure.
And I guess as long at the end of the day it's all done, that we're good to go. But it's just it's getting students really to really just trying to do things as timely as possible, as much as they can. And sometimes their life circumstances don't allow that, and that's fine, and that's what we're here for. But if we can get people to apply, get your aid, and move on.
Great. We're chatting with Robert Locanto, the Associate Director of Financial Aid, and we will continue our conversation when QCC's Face the Region continues right after this brief time out on Full Service Radio, AM 830, WCRN. Welcome back once again to QCC's Face the Region here on Full Service Radio, AM 830, WCRN. And this afternoon, chatting with Robert Locanto, the Associate Director of Financial Aid at Quinsigamond Community College, which, as we have mentioned earlier in the program, as far as tuition goes, extremely reasonable to begin with. So
very reasonable.
If you've even had the inkling of maybe pursuing a college education or jumping back and maybe getting a degree that your life circumstances sort of forbade you from getting at an earlier age, want to come back, you guys
Sure.
welcome with open arms, as I understand.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about that situation. Suppose you do apply for financial aid, you're going to school, everything's going along great, and then life happens.
Yeah.
Maybe it's health, maybe it's who knows.
Yep.
Ailing parents, you can't continue on. What happens?
Sure, that's a great question, because we do have sometimes families or students will fill out the financial aid form, they'll report financial information, and then all of a sudden job loss, maybe a parent or even yourself as a student. lose a job, and now the circumstances change, and maybe what you were able to pay or afford has gone away. So in those situations, it's really important that you basically engage our office at that time. There is a reevaluation process that we can do to kind of reconsider your ability to pay for your education based on not what was in the past, but kind of what you're experiencing now. So there's some paperwork that we would have you fill out. We might have to have you document the change of circumstances, that you're, if it's an unemployment situation or if it's a medical situation, we might need something from a doctor or showing some medical expenses, or well, depending on what the situation is, the documentation would vary. But a lot of times we can reevaluate that, and a lot of times students that show a significant change in their finances, or the parents or themselves, we can change the aid package. They become eligible for things that perhaps they weren't eligible for before. And so that allows them to continue their education and alleviate some of the burden of the finances based on their new situation.
Sure.
I always joke with families, if the converse happens, you win the lottery or other things, you probably can hold that information until the next year when you fill out your forms. And we don't get too many people that contact us about that.
Well,
you know what I mean?
good.
So, but we do encourage, in all seriousness, we do encourage families or students to really engage us at that time.
And during the break, Robert, you also mentioned after you apply and get financial aid, there is some responsibility on the part of the student that you keep up your end of the bargain. And what are some of the requirements?
Sure.
Is it just grades, or how's that work?
It is part of it. It is part of it. I mean, students do need to maintain what we would call satisfactory academic progress. So there can be times where a student, if they're not pulling the grades or completing the number of courses they need to complete within a semester, they may potentially lose financial aid. There is an appeal process, and students do appeal, and the majority of students are first appeals, usually are granted. But obviously, the grades have to be at certain levels in order for financial aid to continue, to be able to, to keep receiving that. And some of that's federal guidelines that the college has to work under and things like that. So, we try to encourage students, make sure you're going to class, make sure you understand your professor's attendance policy, complete the assignments. If you feel like you're not doing well, there's lots of tutoring opportunities and advising services on campus. Seek out those people so that you can get the grades and the aid continues.
So the fast times at Richmond High lifestyle does not apply.
Yeah, the Jeff Spicolis of the world probably need to buckle down on the books a little bit.
So let's sort of bring this full circle and,
Sure.
and reiterate kind of what we've been talking about. Number one, it's extremely reasonable to attend here
Yes,
at QCC.
very reasonable.
And even if you think you wouldn't qualify financial aid, it would behoove you to kind of look into it anyway.
Definitely,
Correct?
definitely. It's always good because, as I said before, you may be eligible for something you think you're not eligible for, and it's better for us to tell you what you can or not receive than to base it on what what you think you may be eligible for.
Now, you also said that there are alternative forms of financial aid. We
Yep.
didn't really talk about that. Maybe you can quickly.
Yeah, we always encourage. I mean, we strongly encourage students to go through the FAFSA process because you want to be considered for federal grants or state grants, because obviously that's the best type of aid to get, grant assistance based on financial need. A lot of students qualify for that, so we obviously want you to go through that process. Especially even loans, federal loans that you might get or state loans, they can be at very reasonable interest rates. That you don't have to start paying those back until you leave school. But we always encourage students to look at outside scholarships, private scholarship opportunities. There are a number of websites, search engines, I should say, on our website that students can go out and do scholarship searches. It can be a little daunting, the process, because sometimes, depending on the scholarship, you might have to have a certain major or certain grade point average. It might be based on your heritage, your nationality, things like that. But a lot of times, students can find scholarships out there that not only can be used for their first year of school, but for subsequent years also. So we always tell students to do that. Don't pay for scholarship searches. Sometimes, once you start applying for schools, you get into databases and you may receive information about people that will promise you scholarships, and pretty much all they're doing is going out to these free resources and then just giving you the information. So don't pay the money, do the research yourself. And sometimes students do find outside sources of aid that can help pay for their build expenses, but maybe even outside personal expenses.
And how often do you revisit the re-upping of your financial aid? Is that year to year?
It is. It's an annual process, so you do need to do the FAFSA every year. You have to go through that. We do have to reevaluate your student's financial situation yearly, so you do have to go through that. And basically October 1st is kind of the start date for the next academic year.
Right.
It's an annual annual event, I guess.
So the key point is to get off your butt and get in there
Yes.
and start making it happen.
Get the financial aid done as quickly as you can.
There you go. Robert Liccato, the Associate Director of Financial Aid here on QCC's Face the Region. Thanks for coming. And very informative, and it's good to know that there continue to be a lot of opportunities for kids and people of my age group to consider coming back to school at QCC. Thanks very much. That'll do it for this edition of Face the Region, QCC's Face the Region, heard right here on Full Service Radio, AM 830, WCRN.
This has been Quinsigamond Community College's Face the Region. Join us again next weekend on AM 830 WCRN.